The other line that came to me in A Course in Miracles, where it uses the word problem, said this: if you do have a problem, the only problem you have is your belief that you are separate from your source. The moment that we took on this idea that we were separate from our source and no longer believed in our own integrity of our own mind, the moment that we took on that, we began to develop something called problems, something called illusions. And I'd like to suggest to you that every problem that we have, the way I see it, is nothing more than a mistake or an illusion. And how do we do something about these mistakes that we have? They are in our minds. You know, it says very clearly in most of the spiritual literature, as a man thinketh, so is he. Emerson, one of the people that we revere, who lived right here in Concord, said that the ancestor to every action is a thought. Once you start to understand that what you think about, your thoughts, is what expands and becomes your life, you start getting real careful about what you think about. Real careful. So that when you have a thought that says, gee, I got a sniffle, it's in my nose, but tomorrow it'll probably be down here in my throat. And on Wednesday, it's probably going to be here in my chest. Always seems to happen this way. And on Thursday, I'm going to have a fever. I get one every time. You can just about count on it. I'm going to have to take Friday off. Now, it's Monday morning, and you got a sniffle, but in your mind, in your thoughts, you're taking Friday off with a fever, and lo and behold, your body begins to react to this thought, which is just a mistake of the intellect to begin with. Supposing that you had a belief system that said 2 + 2 is 7. For some reason, you were just hung up on this idea. And you said 2 + 2 is 7, and you took your calculator and you reformulated it in such a way so that it would appear to be 2 + 2 is 7. And then you tried to balance your checkbook, and you tried to make your life work based upon this formulation, that 2 + 2 is 7. You would find that your life would be out of balance financially virtually all of the time. Every time you push that button and push those numbers, nothing would ever work. So the question is, what do I do in order to correct this mistake in my thinking? And that's where the word solution comes in. But we can't bring the solution in until we understand that everything that we have, do you know that every relationship that you're in right now, every single person watching this, every relationship you're in is in your mind. You can't get behind the eyeballs of another human being and be them. All you can do is process them through your thoughts. Now, if your thoughts about the person that you love are about what is wrong, about what you don't like, about what they ought to be, about what they used to be, about how they disappoint you, about how bad they talk, about their language, about anything at all, if that's what you're thinking about, what you think about is what expands, more of what you're thinking about will continue to show up in your life, whether you like it or not. It's one of the great ironies. I always tell people that if you understood this concept, the best way to do it is to put it in terms of money. If I had $1 million, and I were to take this $1 million, and I were to give it to you, and I'd say, this purpose of this $1 million is for you to go out to the mall, and every store you come to where you see something that you really like, you're to purchase it. Any place you go, whatever you like, you purchase it. So you take this $1 million and say, this is great. You walk into the first store that you see, and there's a rug there that's just appalling. It's hideous. It's just awful. It doesn't match anything in your house, and it costs $10,000. And you look at that thing and say, ugh, I would never want that. Here's $10,000. Send it home. Now you go to the next store in the mall, and it's got a lamp in it that matches the rug, all right? And you look at this hideous lamp and you say, that's the worst looking thing I've ever seen. Send 2 of those home, and they cost $5,000 a piece. So far, you've taken your money and you've spent $20,000 of it on what you don't want. And all day long, every time you saw something that you didn't want, you spent your energy, your money, on sending it home. Then you get home and you say to yourself, why is my house filled with all of this stuff that I don't want? And the answer is, you're crazy. This is called insanity. You have energy to spend it on what you do want, yet you continue to use it to purchase what you don't want. And the metaphor here is that your thoughts work exactly the same way. The energy that you have for creating what you want is in your thoughts. And if you want your relationship to be divine and to be perfect and to be beautiful, then you have to begin to think the kinds of thoughts that are going to create that for you. If, on the other hand, you put your thoughts on what the person isn't, what they ought to be, what they used to be, what you think is wrong, you'll see more of that showing up. And it works in everything in your life. Changing your mind, changing your thoughts is how we change the problems, if you will, that we face in our life. There's a sacred sound that lives beneath all sound. It is not loud, it is not urgent, and it is not outside of you. It is the still hum of your eternal being, a vibration so gentle, so constant, that it is often drowned out by the noise of your thinking, the clutter of your conditioning, and the hurried chase of your ego. But it is always there, waiting. Like an ancient friend who never left, just quietly sat beside you, trusting you'd one day remember to listen. This is the sound of silence. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of truth. You were not born into noise. You arrived as silence. The infant does not seek to be impressive, clever, or approved of. The infant is simply here. No story, no shame, no schedule. Just being, just presence, just soul. And it is in that state, untouched by past, unseduced by future, that the divine speaks clearest, not through thunder or spectacle, but through the quiet whisper that arises when the mind finally surrenders its grasp and the heart opens to the eternal. You have been told to seek answers. You have been taught to strive, to push, to acquire information and validation and success. But the greatest truths will not be shouted through effort. They will be revealed in stillness. Not because they are hiding, but because you are running. Running from moment to moment, from task to task, from thought to thought, from self to self. And yet, everything you are running toward is resting peacefully inside the very silence you keep avoiding. The world teaches us that silence is empty, but silence is not empty. Silence is full. It holds the totality of wisdom, the blueprint of every sacred life, the knowing that existed before language ever did. Silence is the space where your soul sings without needing to be heard. It is where your fear dissolves, not because it is solved, but because it is seen through. Silence reveals that there was never anything to solve, only illusions to let go of. We confuse activity with purpose. We confuse noise with value. And so we shout our affirmations. We obsess over fixing ourselves. We perform our spirituality like a show. But the soul is not impressed by performance. The soul does not clap when you look awakened. It only smiles when you are. An awakening is not a performance. It is a return, a homecoming to that original silence where you are not this role, not this pain, not even this name. You are awareness itself. In silence, you stop being a person with problems. You become a presence with power. Because the problems only exist in the theater of mind, and silence turns off the projector. Suddenly you realize the struggle was never out there. It was the noise you allowed in here. It was the commentary, the resistance, the narrative. And when the narrative pauses, so does the suffering. Not because the world changed, but because you stopped believing your thoughts were the world. When you begin to rest in silence, not as an escape, but as a return, you realize something extraordinary. That all your searching was holy, but unnecessary. You never had to become enough.
You already were. You never had to find peace. You just had to stop fighting yourself long enough to feel it. You never had to be saved. Only reminded. We live in a society that glorifies answers but fears stillness. But stillness is the answer. Not a word, not a doctrine, not a formula, but a state of being. Stillness is the meeting point between you and God, where no translation is needed. No achievements, no apologies, no explanations, just presence, just truth, just you, stripped of all the noise you thought you needed to be loved. You may have believed that healing requires struggle, but healing is what happens when struggle ceases. Healing begins not when you try harder, but when you surrender deeper. It begins when you finally sit, not with an agenda, but with reverence. When you stop performing your pain and begin witnessing it. When you stop asking, how do I fix this? And begin asking, who is aware of this? Because in that question, something shifts. The pain becomes a cloud and you, the sky. Silence reminds you that you are not the storm. You are the space in which the storm appears. The emotions will rise and fall. The thoughts will dance and disappear. The stories will come and go. But who you are does not move. Who you are is not a wave. It is the ocean. And the ocean is never afraid of its waves. There is a divine intelligence that lives in you, not outside you, not above you, not later, but now. It does not speak in language, but in presence. It does not need convincing, it already knows. It is the voice that says, you are held, even when your mind says you are falling. It is the pulse that reminds you in every breath that you are enough simply because you are. And the more you listen, the less you chase. The more you feel it, the less you need. You do not need to yell at the universe to be heard. You only need to be quiet enough to hear it whisper back. It has always been whispering, but not into your ears, into your awareness. Not into your intellect, into your being. And the only thing that ever blocked the message was the belief that it should come in a different form. The mind says, give me proof. But the soul says, just feel. And when you stop needing your healing to look dramatic and instead let it feel sacred, you will know the answer was never far. It was right here. Underneath the noise, beneath the drama, beneath the grasping, the answer you seek is in silence. Because in silence, you become what you seek. You do not find peace. You remember that you are peace. And if you are brave enough to sit in that silence without your mask, without your resume, without your wounds, something astonishing begins to happen. The false self begins to fade. The roles begin to melt. The seeking begins to slow. And in the space that's left, a presence arises. Gentle, quiet, but unmistakable. It does not demand attention because it already has your love. It does not try to impress you because it is you. There is a rhythm to life that you cannot hear when you are shouting, but when you become quiet enough, the rhythm returns. It's the rhythm of breath, of grace, of nature. The rhythm of a heart that knows it is connected to something infinite. And in that rhythm, you do not have to force clarity. You do not have to demand purpose. You simply return to what you've always been aware, alive, whole. And the irony is, the more you silence the mind, the louder your soul becomes. Not in volume, but in truth. Not in noise, but in knowing. You become fluent in the language of the present. You begin to see God not as a distant judge, but as the quiet space between your thoughts. You begin to live less from story, more from stillness. Less from effort, more from essence. Let the world keep chasing noise. Let others fill their days with more opinions, more distractions, more labels. You return to the sacred. You return to the place where truth does not have to be explained, only felt. Where your worth is not earned, only remembered. where your next step does not need to be mapped, only trusted. This is the gift of silence. It doesn't teach you what to think. It teaches you how to listen. And when you listen, truly listen, you hear something profound, not a new instruction, not a divine commandment, but a remembering of what you are beneath the personality, a remembering of the vast, limitless being who has always been whole, a remembering that life is not trying to test you, it's trying to reveal you. So stop waiting for the thunder. Stop demanding that the universe speak in your language. Learn to feel the message in the silence. And you'll realize you were never disconnected. You were just distracted. You were never the noise. You only believed in it. You only learned to identify with it the rushing thoughts, the echoing doubts, the applause and the criticism, the voices that told you who to be, how to perform, what to suppress, and what to fear. But underneath it all, you were the one who heard the noise, not the noise itself. And that which hears the noise is not disturbed by it. That is your essence. And it has never once left you. Silence is not something you create. It is what remains when all the clutter is released. It is what remains when you stop trying to control how you appear and instead allow yourself to be what you are. Silence is the space between judgment and acceptance, between fear and surrender, between the false identity and the true self. In silence, the veil lifts, not with effort, but with grace. And you see clearly not with the eyes, but with the soul. There is a sacred difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is the product of noise, of unconscious habit and conditioned emotion. Response is the fruit of silence. A person who lives in silence does not react from fear. They respond from love. They do not echo the world's chaos. They embody its stillness. They do not need to be loud to be powerful, because their presence speaks louder than any words ever could. The spiritual masters of this world, the ones who radiate peace, they are not empty of emotion. They are empty of illusion. They have stopped identifying with the noise in their head and started listening to the wisdom of the still place within. They are not above suffering. They are simply not ruled by it. They have made a home in the silence. And from that home, they bring light wherever they go. You have the same light. It is not lesser. It is not distant. It only asks that you slow down long enough to see it flickering beneath the rubble. There is a divine intelligence behind all of creation. The tree does not rush its growth. The sun does not force its rise. The river does not panic when the rocks appear. Nature moves in harmony because it does not resist its own unfolding. But we as humans have forgotten how to trust. We interrupt our own peace with mental commentary. We mistake urgency for importance. We judge ourselves by how fast we can move rather than how deeply we can listen. But when you return to silence, you return to nature, you return to the rhythm of the soul, which is slow, soft, eternal. You begin to trust again, not in outcomes, but in alignment. Not in control, but in connection. You realize that life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a presence to be felt. And the deeper you go into that presence, the less you need from the outside. Because wholeness is no longer an achievement, it's your starting point. You are not incomplete. You are not a mistake. You are not lost. You are a wave that forgot it belonged to the ocean. And silence is the place where the wave remembers. You do not need more effort, you need more surrender. You do not need to fix your life, you need to witness it without judgment. The ego will tell you to strive. The soul will ask you to rest. Because in resting, you come home. Let it be okay not to have an answer. Let it be okay to sit with the question. Let it be okay to drop the mask you've worn for so long that you forgot what your face looked like. You do not need to impress the divine. You are the divine. And God is not keeping score. God is waiting in the silence not to evaluate you, but to embrace you. There is no punishment in stillness, only revelation. You will not lose anything real by going silent. You will only lose the noise that was pretending to be real. You will only lose the false self, the one who needed to prove, to earn, to defend, to shout. The real self has no need for any of that. The real self is already whole, already enough, already divine, and it lives always in the silence. Listen not with your ears, but with your being. Listen to the spaces between the words. Listen to the breath between the thoughts. Listen to the presence behind the moment. This is where God lives. This is where truth lives. This is where you live when you finally stop trying to be someone and remember how to simply be. You have been seeking peace as if it were somewhere else. But peace is not a location. It is a return to your natural frequency. And you cannot return by running, only by stopping, only by letting go, only by releasing the belief that peace must be earned or that truth must be proven. Peace is not proven, it is felt. And it is felt in the moment when you become quiet enough to notice what has always been here. The past has a voice, the future has a voice. But neither voice belongs to now. And now is where your power lives. Now is where the soul breathes. Now is where healing happens. You do not heal by understanding the past. You heal by letting go of the need to drag it into the present. You do not awaken by fearing the future. You awaken by realizing that the present moment is eternal and nothing truly sacred can be missed from it. In silence, there is no comparison. There is no competition. There is no one to be better than, no one to be beneath. In silence, there is no role to play. There is only love, only presence, only truth. It is in silence that you remember the unshakable truth. You were never broken. You were simply buried under ideas that never belonged to you. The answer you seek is not louder than your pain. It is softer than your thoughts. It is not above you or beyond you. It is within you, waiting for you to stop pushing and start allowing. To stop asking what's next and start asking what's now, because what's now is where the divine is dancing. What's now is where the sacred breath of life is still singing you into existence. And it sings the same song to all of us. Be still. You are already home. You do not need more knowledge. You need less noise. The noise is not just in your environment, it's in your head. It's the static of a mind conditioned to fear stillness, to equate being with doing, and to see rest as laziness rather than reverence. But when you are silent, you begin to unlearn the false truths you were taught. You realize that everything you were chasing was born of the belief that you were not already whole. And that belief, not your circumstances, was the source of your suffering. The mind is loud because it is unsure. The soul is silent because it is certain. Certainty does not shout. Truth does not need volume. Real wisdom arrives like the sunrise, not with fanfare, but with radiance. It does not beg to be noticed. It simply illuminates. And silence is the place where this illumination becomes visible. Not outside you, within you. You have confused silence with absence. But silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of space. The space in which sound arises, dances, and dissolves. Just as you are not your thoughts, but the space in which thoughts appear. Just as you are not your body, but the awareness that watches the body age while the spirit remains ageless, you are the one who sees, the one who knows, the one who simply is. And this infinite presence cannot be harmed, cannot be diminished, cannot be lost. It can only be forgotten in noise. Let the silence teach you. Let it teach you that your wounds are not who you are, that your worth was never up for negotiation, that you do not need to climb a ladder to touch God, you only need to sit down and listen. The higher self does not live in the clouds, it lives in the breath. in the pause. In the moment you stop trying to be and simply become aware that you already are. Every moment spent in silence is a homecoming, a return from exile, a reunion with the source that never left you, only waited patiently for you to remove the walls. You thought life abandoned you, but it didn't. You just forgot how to hear it. You mistook the silence for punishment when it was actually an invitation. An invitation to stop, to breathe, to feel the divine frequency beneath the chaos. There is a holiness in quiet moments that the ego cannot comprehend because the ego thrives on noise. It defines itself by conflict, by identity, by motion. The ego says, be more, do more, prove more. But the soul whispers, you are. That's it. You are. Not what they said, not what you did, not what you feared. Just you are. That is the beginning of freedom. Not a transformation into something else, but a return to what has always been. When you learn to be still, you become intimate with the divine. Not through belief, but through being. You don't need a new belief system. You need an undisturbed moment with your own presence. That is where you meet God, not through dogma, but through awareness. Not through rituals alone, but through the reverence of attention. There is no temple more sacred than the present moment. No scripture more direct than your breath. You are not behind. You are not too late. You have not failed. These are stories written by the mind that does not yet trust the unfolding of life. But the soul has no calendar. It only has now. And in the now, there is no judgment, only clarity. There is no guilt, only understanding. There is no shame, only compassion. The silence knows this. It is not against you. It is holding you. Softly, constantly, waiting only for you to become still enough to feel it. There are seasons in your life when words will not be enough, when advice will ring hollow, when the mind, no matter how brilliant, cannot lead you home. In these seasons, silence becomes your teacher. A teacher that says nothing, yet shows you everything. A teacher that gives no answers, yet dissolves every false question. A teacher that does not fix you because you were never broken, only buried beneath noise. If you could only sit in silence long enough, you would begin to feel the edges of your identity melt. The roles you've played, the expectations you've carried, the wounds you've named yourself after all, begin to fall away. And what is left is not a void, it is not emptiness, it is fullness. The fullness of being. The stillness that speaks louder than any accomplishment ever could. This silence is not passive. It is not weak. It is the most powerful force in the universe. It creates worlds. It births stars. It transmutes pain. It dissolves fear. It reminds you of your eternal nature. And when you align with it, you stop trying to win at life. You start dancing with it. You stop trying to survive. You stop trying to protect yourself from the moment, and instead you surrender to its intelligence. The greatest truth is this. The answer is not hidden. The answer is not far. The answer is not complicated. The answer is within. It is not a formula. It is a frequency. And that frequency cannot be understood through analysis. It can only be felt through presence. The answer is not a thing to be found. It is a state to be remembered. And silence is the gateway to that remembrance. You were not sent here to perform. You were not sent here to accumulate titles. You were sent here to remember the truth of what you are. You were sent here to learn how to be not someone, but presence itself. You were sent here to know yourself, not as the identity, but as the observer of all identities. And once you know yourself in that way, you are free. Not because the world changed, but because your awareness did. Let the noise fall away. Let the urgency dissolve. Let the chasing end. Let yourself land here, now, in the sacred simplicity of silence, where nothing needs to happen for everything to be complete, where you are not becoming, you are being, Where you are not achieving, you are allowing. Where you are not demanding from life, you are receiving its grace. And when you emerge from silence, you do not return the same. You return lighter, clearer, more loving. Not because you gained anything, but because you remembered everything. The fog lifts, the heart opens, the mind relaxes, and the soul rejoices because you came back. You came back to yourself. And in doing so, you came back to life. The more you live in silence, the more you become aware of a deeper guidance that was never missing, only muffled. You begin to feel your intuition not as a rare occurrence, but as your native language. You begin to notice synchronicity, where once you saw coincidence, you begin to trust your own path. Not because it is guaranteed, but because it is sacred. And that trust, born of silence, becomes your anchor in a world addicted to noise. No longer do you need to chase what others chase. No longer do you need to explain what cannot be explained. You begin to live gently, yet powerfully. You begin to embody presence, not as an effort, but as your essence. You walk slower, you speak less, you listen more. You watch your own mind with compassion, and you watch others through the eyes of understanding, not judgment. This is the gift of silence. It changes how you see, not what you see. The world remains the same, yet you are different. And in that difference, everything is transformed. You begin to feel beauty in the ordinary. You begin to appreciate what you once overlooked. You see divinity not only in sunsets and temples, but in traffic lights and wrinkles, in the silence between two people who no longer need words to know they are loved. The answer you seek has never been outside your reach, but it has always been outside your noise. And now that the noise is quiet, you can see clearly again. You can feel again. You can breathe in life, not as a means to an end, but as the end itself. Each breath is a prayer. Each moment is a temple. Each act of presence is an offering. And you are the altar. Even your pain becomes different in silence. Not because it disappears, but because it loses its grip. It no longer defines you, it teaches you. It no longer owns you, it flows through you. You begin to see that even your suffering was part of the return. That even the loudest seasons of your life were nudging you back toward quiet. That your heartbreak was not a punishment, but a portal. A sacred crack through which the light could reach you again. The ego resists this truth. It wants things to be more complex, more dramatic. It wants a formula, a story, a reason to cling to its identity. But the soul only wants freedom. And freedom does not need noise. It needs awareness. It needs trust. It needs surrender. Not surrender as defeat, surrender as alignment, surrender as the courage to release what was never yours to carry. When you touch silence deeply, you realize that the self you've been defending was never who you were, that all your walls were made of thought, that all your masks were inherited roles. And in that realization, a soft peace arises, not the peace of the world, but the peace of the soul, a peace that does not depend on circumstances because it was never created by them. You no longer wait for life to be perfect before you feel peace. You bring peace to life as it is. You no longer pray for change from desperation. You pray from gratitude, knowing that even without a single external shift, you are already held, already loved, already home. And from this home, everything becomes possible. The stillness becomes your compass, not because it gives you all the answers, but because it connects you to the source that doesn't need them. You move not with urgency, but with clarity. Not with panic, but with power. Not with fear, but with faith. The world may still pull at you, but you are no longer pulled apart. You return to silence like a river returns to the ocean effortlessly, without question, because it knows where it belongs. And from that place, your very presence becomes a gift to others. You speak less, but your words carry weight. You advise less, but your energy heals. You convince no one, yet your being inspires. Because in a world that shouts, your silence becomes magnetic. In a world that performs, your authenticity becomes medicine. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to earn anyone's respect. You no longer need to pretend, because silence has stripped you down to what is real. And what is real does not need to be explained. It only needs to be lived. And so you begin to live not as a seeker of answers, but as a bearer of presence. Not as someone trying to find their worth, but as someone who finally remembered they never lost it. You are not your history. You are not your habits. You are not even your name. You are the awareness that sees all of it, the consciousness behind the curtain. You are the witness, the still point, the unshakable essence that watches the waves come and go without becoming them. And the more you reside in that space, the more life opens up without force, because life recognizes itself in you. And where recognition flows, miracles do too. This is not philosophy, it is remembrance. This is not theory, it is truth, felt directly when all the distractions fall away. And what remains is not a lesser version of you, it is the real you, the radiant you, the you who never needed fixing, only uncovering, the you who has been silently waiting for you to stop running, to stop pretending, to stop performing, and just be. So sit in silence today. Not to achieve anything, but to release everything. Not to become spiritual, but to remember you already are. Let the silence cleanse you. Let it dissolve your tension. Let it hold your fear without needing to resolve it. Let it remind you that you were never abandoned, only invited. And now, finally, you've accepted. There will still be noise in the world, but you do not have to let it live in you. There will still be moments of doubt, of fear, of noise rising again, but that is okay, because now you know the way back. Now you have tasted what is real. And once you have tasted it, you cannot forget it. You can only return again and again to the place that never left. The answer you seek is in silence. And in that silence, you will not just find the answer, you will find yourself. And in finding yourself, you will discover you were the answer all along. There comes a moment, not always loud, not always visible, when something stirs inside you. A whisper beneath the noise of the world, a gentle nudge against the walls you've built. It's not a cry for help, it's a call to remembrance. Not a plea to become something new, but an invitation to return to what you've always been. The real you was never gone, just buried. Buried beneath expectations you inherited. Buried beneath stories you were told. Buried beneath disappointments you never deserved. Like the sun behind the clouds, your true self never ceased to shine, was only momentarily obscured. The soul cannot vanish. It can only be veiled. We have been conditioned to forget. We were taught to listen to voices louder than our own. We were encouraged to trade our truth for approval, our joy for performance, our presence for productivity. And so we buried the softness. We hid the stillness. We abandoned the innocence. Not because we were broken, but because we thought that's what survival demanded. But let me tell you something simple and eternal. You were never meant to live a life of disguise. You were never meant to become a copy of anyone else's dream. You were born in truth, formed in love, and destined for freedom. And though you've wandered far, nothing essential has been lost. The gold is still in you. It has only been waiting for you to remember where you placed the shovel. You are not the names you were called. You are not the roles you perform. You are not the fears you carry. These are layers, masks, echoes. But beneath them lives something eternal and untouched. Something the world did not give you and therefore cannot take away. There is a light in you that predates your pain. There is a wholeness in you that survived the fragmentation. There is a love in you that has nothing to prove. And when you begin to listen, to truly listen, you'll hear the voice of your soul reminding you, I am still here. I always was. We bury ourselves under layers of striving and shame because the ego teaches us that who we are is not enough. It shouts, be more, do more, win more. And so we become performers in our own lives, applauded for the act, yet exhausted from the pretending. The tragedy is not that we forget, we all forget. The tragedy is believing the forgetting is final, but it's not. You are allowed to remember. You are allowed to put down the performance. You are allowed to stop running and sit in your own stillness. You are allowed to say, I miss who I was before the world told me who to be. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of spiritual courage. Healing does not begin when we change. Healing begins when we become honest about where we are. When we say, I'm tired of wearing masks that don't fit. I'm tired of living someone else's life while my own soul waits patiently behind the curtain. You do not need to become anything. You need only to uncover. You do not need to seek what you already are. You need only to see what you have buried. The acorn does not strive to become an oak. It simply surrenders to the truth of what it is. And in that surrender, everything it is destined to be unfolds naturally, organically, miraculously. The same is true for you. Your soul is not interested in your resume. It does not keep score of your failures. It does not measure your worth and productivity. It knows nothing of scarcity or shame. Your soul is interested in one thing, truth. And truth cannot be manufactured, it can only be revealed. So breathe, and in this breath, allow the dust to settle. Feel beneath the performance. Feel beneath the guilt. Feel beneath the should and the should have. Do you feel it? That flicker of aliveness? That is you, the real you, still warm, still awake, still whole. Not the version of you molded by society. Not the version of you that fears rejection. Not the version of you trying to earn worth, but the version that just is. The child who once played without apology, the spirit who once loved without fear, the soul who once trusted without evidence. The real you is not broken. The real you is not confused. The real you is not behind. The real you is free. And all the pain you've walked through, all the betrayal, all the heartbreak, all the disappointment, they did not erase you. They revealed where you stopped believing in your own light. But that light, it never stopped believing in you. There is something holy about reclaiming what you buried. There is something sacred about meeting yourself again after years of pretending. It is the most intimate reunion. The ego will resist. It will panic at the thought of losing control. It will whisper lies to keep you in hiding. But you are not here to obey fear. You are here to dissolve it with awareness. You were not born to live in defense. You were born to live in alignment. You were not born to compete. You were born to connect. You were not born to hustle for worth. You were born worthy. Every time you return to yourself, the universe sings. Every time you say yes to stillness, the divine listens. Every time you dare to feel instead of suppress, you melt another layer of illusion. You don't need more fixing, you need more remembering. You don't need to be taught your worth. You need to unlearn everything that made you doubt it. You don't need a map. You are the destination. And you've been waiting for your own arrival. Keep going inward. Keep digging. Every buried truth is waiting for your permission to rise. And when it does, you'll weep not, because you found something new, but because you finally returned to what has always been yours. And the beautiful paradox is this: the moment you stop chasing who you think you're supposed to be, the real you comes forth with grace, not effort. There is no struggle in being what is already true. There is only a quiet softening like a flower unfolding to the sun, not because it was forced, but because it was ready. You have been ready longer than you realize. You have carried the keys while believing you were locked out. You have sung the melody of your soul in whispers, afraid someone might hear your joy and judge it. But now is the season of returning. Now is the time for shedding the heavy cloaks of pretending. Now is the sacred invitation to live unburdened by the expectations of others and unashamed of the depth of your light. There is no medal for dimming your spirit to keep others comfortable. There is no reward for betraying your truth in the name of being accepted by people who don't even know who they are. You are not here to be understood by the asleep. You are here to awaken. And awaken you must, not in rebellion, but in remembrance, not in anger, but in peace. Because the real you is not here to fight for identity. It already knows its origin is divine. The real you is not in scarcity, nor confusion, nor desperation. The real you breathes in harmony with all that is. Imagine for a moment that you were never taught to abandon yourself. Imagine that no one ever told you to earn love, to fear failure, to doubt your worth. Who would you be today? You'd be bold, soft, limitless. You'd be unapologetically radiant. You'd be free. But even though the world did teach you otherwise, and even though you did forget, it's not too late. Because what is real cannot be destroyed. Truth may be delayed, but it is never denied. And the soul waits patiently, lovingly, as you remove each mask, each wound, each lie. It waits without judgment. It waits without rush, because your soul remembers who you are, even when you do not. It's why the ache has never left. Not the ache of loss, but the ache of remembering. That quiet longing you feel, it's not a weakness. It's the voice of truth calling you home. And as you begin to answer that call, not with panic, but with presence, you start to feel life differently. You notice the sacred in the simple. You hear silence not as emptiness, but as clarity. You look in the mirror and see someone you're finally willing to meet, not fix. And that's when it begins. The rebirth. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep. A returning, layer by layer, to the essence beneath it all. You realize that your worth was never up for negotiation. You realize that love was never something you had to win. You realize that your sensitivity was never a flaw, it was your compass. And the more you honor what you used to hide, the more you shine without effort. This is not arrogance. This is reverence. This is not ego. This is alignment. You stop asking, how do I become enough? And start asking, what have I believed that made me forget I already am? And like a snake shedding its skin, you release the roles, the people-pleasing, the striving, the proving. You lay them down gently, with gratitude for how they served you when you didn't yet know your truth. Then you step forward, not into a new identity, but into the space you once feared was too sacred for you to inhabit. This is where you begin to live, truly live, not in reaction to the world, but in response to your spirit. Not from wounded identity, but from remembered wholeness. And you see now that healing was never about becoming something different. Healing was about revealing who was always beneath the pain. The innocent one, the quiet one, the true one. And now you are ready to let that one speak, to let that one breathe, to let that one lead. There will be moments when the old story tries to pull you back. It will tell you you're not ready. that you're not healed enough, that you're still too broken. But listen closely. That voice is not your soul. It's the echo of your conditioning. And echoes may sound real, but they have no substance. They cannot touch you unless you stop and give them meaning. You don't need to argue with the noise. You just need to walk forward anyway, eyes open, heart steady, spirit rooted. And when you do, when you walk with the quiet knowing of your wholeness, life begins to rearrange itself around your truth. You attract what honors you. You align with what nurtures you. You magnetize what speaks your soul's language. This is not magic. This is resonance. This is the law of harmony. The universe responds not to what you pretend to be, but to who you actually are. And when who you are is no longer hidden beneath shame, no longer buried beneath fear, you become a lighthouse. Not because you shout, not because you strive, but because you exist fully, freely, and fiercely as yourself. And that is the greatest service you can offer the world, your authenticity. Not a performance, not a projection, but your living truth. Because when you stop hiding, you give others permission to stop hiding too. When you forgive yourself for forgetting, you give others the courage to remember. And when you live with your heart uncovered, you become the healing you once waited for. So let this be your sacred reclamation. Let this be the breath where you say, I am no longer a stranger to myself. Let this be the moment where you stop digging through the rubble of who you used to be and instead rise clean and whole from the silence of your becoming. Because the real you is not waiting at the end of your achievements. The real you is not waiting in the mirror of someone else's approval. The real you is not waiting on the other side of perfection. The real you is now, right here, beneath every false layer, beneath every buried truth, beneath every mask, alive, whole, sacred, and ready. Not ready to chase, not ready to perform, but ready to live as who you were before the forgetting. Because the real you was never gone, just buried. And now, you remember. There is a divine rhythm to awakening. It does not come in a rush, but in ripples. One realization leads to another. One truth uncovers the next. And slowly, your life becomes less about running from pain and more about moving toward presence. You no longer seek escape, you seek alignment. You no longer try to numb the ache, you listen to it. Because now you understand the ache is sacred. It is not a flaw in your design. It is a compass pointing you back to where you buried your joy. And isn't that beautiful? That even in your suffering, there was guidance. That even in your confusion, there was wisdom. You thought you were lost, but you were actually being led. Not away from yourself, but deeper into yourself. The breakdowns, the betrayals, the silent nights, they were not detours. They were doorways. Doorways into depth. Doorways into truth. Doorways into the only thing that ever really mattered, your soul's remembrance. And when the remembrance comes, it does not come with fireworks. It comes with peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need conditions. The kind of peace that says, I no longer need to be someone else to feel worthy. It is a peace born not of control, but of surrender. Not of striving, but of being. And in that peace, you begin to see everything differently. The people who hurt you, they were asleep too. The moments you regret, they were your teachers. The mistakes you made, they were chapters, not definitions. You begin to release the grip. You stop gripping the old narrative. You stop defending your limitations. You stop arguing for the smallness that never fits you. You see, now that your pain didn't make you less, it made you aware. Aware of what you never want to abandon again. Aware of what it means to live truthfully, not conveniently. And so you let go not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You let go of the people who only knew how to love the mask. You let go of the timelines that were never yours. You let go of the fight to be seen because you finally see yourself. And oh, how holy that is. To see yourself not through the eyes of trauma, not through the lens of performance, but through the gaze of love. You begin to walk differently. Not with arrogance, but with grace. Not with fear, but with reverence. Because you know what it took to get here. You know the darkness you walked through. You know the courage it took to unbury yourself. And so you don't need to convince anyone anymore. You don't need to explain your worth. You simply live it. You embody it quietly, powerfully, authentically. The real you is not loud, but it is radiant. The real you is not perfect, but it is whole. The real you is not finished, but it is free, free to love without apology, free to express without fear, free to create, not to be noticed, but because it brings you joy. And in this freedom, you discover something else. There is no separation between your healing and the healing of the world. Because every time you show up as your true self, you give someone else permission to breathe deeper. Every time you choose peace over performance, you remind others that peace is possible. Every time you stop hiding, you shift the collective story from shame to sovereignty. This is how change happens, not through force, but through authenticity. Not through shouting, but through shining. And the world needs your shine. Not the polished version, not the filtered version, but the raw, real, beautifully human light that only you carry. You are not here to be like everyone else. You are here to be a mirror that reflects what is true, a mirror that reminds others of their own light, a mirror that says, look, you never lost yourself. You only stopped looking within. So keep looking within. Keep returning. When the world gets noisy, return. When the doubts grow loud, return. When the pain resurfaces, return. Return to the breath. Return to the now. Return to the place inside you that was never touched by fear, never defined by failure, never dimmed by time. That place is home. That place is where the real you lives. And from that place, everything becomes clear. You don't need to chase what's meant for you. It will find you in your authenticity. You don't need to beg for love you are love. You don't need to fear the unknown. The unknown is where your soul dances. And as you live from that space, life begins to unfold in divine rhythm. Not always easy, not always predictable, but always meaningful, always guided, always holy. Because you are no longer walking as someone pretending to be alive. You are walking as someone who has returned, not to a version, but to the original, the essence, the truth, the real you, still here, still radiant, still enough. And now that you've returned to the center of your being, you start to witness the world from a place of calm power, no longer tossed by every opinion, no longer shrinking in rooms that once intimidated you. You realize that nothing outside of you can define the truth within you. That freedom is not found in changing your surroundings, but in transforming the way you see. And now you see with the eyes of the soul. You see through illusion. You see past the masks of others and into the essence they've forgotten too. You no longer crave approval because you recognize the futility of trying to be understood in a language that doesn't speak to your truth. You don't resist that either. You bless it and you let it be. This is the maturity of awakening, not just reclaiming your own soul, but learning how to let others walk their own path without judgment. You begin to understand that everyone is buried in some way. Everyone is healing from something. And so instead of resenting the world, you begin to soften toward it. You move from resentment to compassion, from defense to openness, from why don't they see me to I hope they find themselves too. And that shift, it's nothing short of sacred. You begin to live not as a reaction to the world, but as an offering to it. Your presence becomes medicine. Your authenticity becomes a lighthouse. And you don't need to scream it from rooftops. You simply are, because when you are rooted in the real you, your life itself becomes a transmission, a silent teaching, a quiet revolution of light. And with this, something even more powerful begins to happen. You no longer see your past as a curse. You see it as the soil. You see the pain not as the end of your innocence, but as the beginning of your depth. The things that once made you bitter now make you wise. The wounds that once closed your heart now expand it. You've stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And you've started asking, what did this awaken in me? And that question unlocks the door to your soul. You no longer seek healing from the outside in. You don't chase remedies. You return to the healer within. You trust the divine intelligence in your tears. You listen to your body. You believe your intuition. You treat your triggers not as enemies, but as sacred messengers whispering where more light is needed. And you become gentle, not weak gentle. There is a quiet strength and softness, a profound courage and tenderness. You no longer need the armor because truth doesn't fear exposure. You let others think what they want because their perception cannot alter your essence. You walk unshaken because your peace is no longer negotiable. This is where the real living begins. When you are no longer trying to protect a false self, when you are no longer addicted to performance, when you are no longer imprisoned by the past or obsessed with the future, you begin to live from presence. And presence is not a practice, it is a return. The return to now, the return to simplicity, the return to the breath, the body, the beauty of this exact moment. Because the soul only lives now, and now is enough. Always has been, always will be. When you drop into this moment, the illusion of separation dissolves. You see God in the ordinary. You feel grace in your stillness. You remember that there was never a moment when you were truly alone. You may have forgotten, yes, but forgotten doesn't mean forsaken. You look back at the darkest nights and you no longer curse them. You bow to them because those were the nights you cracked open. Those were the nights the illusions began to fall away. Those were the nights you began to hear the whisper behind the noise saying, come home. And you did. Not all at once. Not perfectly, but faithfully. And now, you are here not as a shadow, but as a soul. Not as a role, but as a presence. Not as a reaction, but as a being. You live slower now because you're no longer in a race. You breathe deeper because you're no longer holding your worth hostage. You smile more because your joy is no longer conditional. You give without grasping. You love without losing yourself. You create without comparing. You've dropped the heaviness, the story, the struggle, not because life got easier, but because you remembered who you are. And the beautiful irony is this: what the world told you to hide is exactly what makes you whole. Your sensitivity is not a flaw, it is your gateway to empathy. Your softness is not a weakness, it is your truest strength. Your presence is not insignificant, it is the very space where healing begins. You no longer try to be impressive. You now aim to be honest. You no longer chase meaning, you create it by being fully here. And in that presence, you are guided, not by fear, not by ego, but by something quieter, deeper, more ancient, the wisdom of the soul, the whisper of your divine source, the intelligence of love itself. And this is the moment where everything turns. This is the moment you stop looking outward for proof and start looking inward for peace. This is the moment where you become the parent to the child inside who was waiting all along to be loved without condition. This is the moment where forgiveness isn't something you do, it's something you become. A state of being that flows through you effortlessly because you are no longer interested in carrying what was never yours. You choose freedom. Not later, not when it's convenient, but now. And now again. And now again. Because freedom isn't a destination, it's a decision. A decision to be here as you are and know that it is more than enough. And so we arrive at the sacred edge of remembrance, where everything you once sought outside of you is revealed to have lived within you all along. You were not born to chase love, you are love. You were not created to seek light, you radiate it. You were not sent here to gather pieces of yourself. You were sent here whole, radiant, holy, and merely invited to remember. The real you was never gone, just buried. Under layers of fear that were never yours, under beliefs passed down by generations too wounded to know better, under silence you thought would keep you safe. But safety is not found in hiding. It is found in truth. And truth never asks you to be small. You are not a damaged soul in need of fixing. You are an infinite spirit in need of freeing. You do not need permission to return to yourself. You do not need validation to exist. You do not need agreement to be whole. The only requirement is your yes. A wholehearted yes to presence. A gentle yes to truth. A courageous yes to life as it unfiltered, unedited, unrehearsed. This is where the liberation begins. When you stop trying to be lovable and realize you are love, when you stop trying to prove your existence and begin inhabiting it fully, when you stop searching for God in the sky and remember God has always lived inside your breath, your body, your being, and when this knowing settles in your bones, the world no longer has the power to shape you. You become rooted in what cannot be shaken. Not arrogant anchored, not defensive devoted to the truth of your soul, devoted to the peace that no storm can take, devoted to the sacred path of being fully, fiercely, freely you. You begin to walk in the world differently. You speak with softness and certainty. You listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. You love without needing anything in return because your source of love is infinite. And you stop grasping for control because you understand that surrender is the truest form of power. This is where the ego dissolves not in defeat, but in awe, because the ego cannot survive in the presence of truth. And truth is what you are. You no longer hold resentment because you no longer hold yourself hostage. You no longer repeat the story because you no longer identify with the suffering. You've learned that the wound is not your identity. It is the place the light enters. It is not a mark of failure. It is the sign of initiation. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be present, to weep when the heart breaks, to laugh when joy floods in, to sit in silence when words are not enough, to dance even when no one watches, to love even if it means loss, to live even if it means letting go. Because real living is not about certainty, it's about surrender. And surrender is not weakness, it is the ultimate alignment. It is saying, I trust what I cannot see because I know who I am. It is releasing the story that says, I must control everything, and returning to the sacred knowing I am already held. And you are held by a universe that speaks in synchronicities. Held by a divine presence that has never left your side. Held by the breath that continues moment after moment, asking nothing but your return. So come back again and again. Come back to the sacred now. Come back to your quiet knowing. Come back to your soul. Because no matter how far you've wandered, no matter how long you've been buried, the truth is still waiting with open arms. It is not bitter. It is not angry. It is not impatient. It is still here. Still whole. Still you. And now you are ready not to become something new, but to unbecome everything that was never real. to shed, to release, to return. And in that return, you risen not above others, but above illusion. Not in ego, but in essence. Not in perfection, but in peace. The world may not understand this version of you. Let it not matter. Because understanding is not your mission, embodiment is. When you live as your truth, you are the mirror the world forgot it needed. When you walk as your soul, you are the prayer the world didn't know it had spoken. And when you return to yourself, you return to all. You begin to live not as a separate being, but as an extension of life itself. The trees become your teachers. The stars become your reminders. The silence becomes your sanctuary. And love pure, boundless love becomes your way of being. Not something you give, not something you do, but something you are. You are the love you've searched for. You are the light you've longed to see. You are the peace you once thought was lost. And now you remember fully, completely. Finally, the real you was never gone, just buried. But you, my dear, have risen, and the world will never be the same.